There we go. Push button. It's new technology.
All right.
Abbott had Costello. Dean Martin had Jerry Lewis. I have Eric. Okay.
We've only done this once before. It was in front of a live audience, too.
Yeah.
Are we going to get to see that on the back monitor?
Whatever the, yeah. Does that show on the back monitor also? Okay.
All right.
As we get started, I just want to share with you just a very way beginnings of the radio ministry for me personally, as well as then moving on into the birth of KVNG there in Casa Grande, Arizona. Like most of you, Pastor Chuck was a major part of perhaps the reason you're even in Calvary Chapel. Perhaps you even coming to Christ was due to the ministry of Pastor Chuck. Maybe some of you grew up in Southern California, and the ministry even directly of Costa Mesa impacted you. Well, I had none of that. As a matter of fact, I was in a denomination nearly all of my life and on and up to my adult life. But the interesting thing is on a Christian radio station that we used to listen to in the Phoenix area, we used to hear this guy from Southern California, this Pastor Chuck guy that just, man, he just laid out the word just so simple and so plain. But, you know, he wasn't part of our denomination, so we weren't real sure whether we could really trust him all that much. But the more we listened to him, the more we just saw, man, how straightforward his teaching was and how the Spirit of God was moving in the words that he said and how it was impacting people. So really and truly, the radio ministry of Pastor Chuck is an important part of kind of a spiritual, not kind of a spiritual growth, but actually a spiritual growth and change that took place in my life after I had been in ministry, after I'd been ordained in the denomination that I was in, served in various churches for several years. And during that period of time, again, the Holy Spirit got a hold of my wife and I's life, turned our life right side up, and no longer were we fitting where we were. We were the square peg trying to fit in a round hole. It took us a bit of a journey until we finally, in the mid-'80s, found Calvary Chapel. We walked in the first Sunday. I could tell you testimony after testimony of how God brought that all about, but that's not what we're here for today. We finally got into Calvary Chapel in the mid-'80s. We started praying, Lord, what would you have us to do? The Lord caused us to move to Casa Grande, which is halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, small little desert town, a farming community, manufacturing community, about 35, 40 minutes outside of the Phoenix area. And again, we started a little Bible study there, and just like many of the churches that Calvary's are, starting from a home Bible study, and now we've been there this last March for 25 years. Well, it was, I believe, it was about 2006 or so, and Bill Lukerman put out on the pastor's gosh, I don't know if it was a chat room or what it was at that point in time, Bill, but something about you set out, or maybe you contacted me directly because there was openings in our area. I don't know. I felt like it was a direct call to me that if we ever wanted radio in our area, the FCC was opening up some FM opportunities in, I think, 2007. And so it was actually, that's what got us going on that. I was not driven toward radio too much prior to that. We were a small church. I thought, man, radio stations, that's like thousands and thousands and thousands. Okay, so it was thousands and thousands.
He was right.
But
little did he know.
But the Lord opened the door, and that began the story that we want to kind of share with you today. And
so let's move down because
yeah, we're going to move down. You can see
that.
us.
You don't need to see us.
Yeah.
The slides tell the story.
We need to see the slides more than you need to
That's
see
right.
us.
That's right. Because
there we go.
I haven't committed all 3,700 of them to. Oh,
yeah, we'll be done by midnight.
We'll be done in time for dinner. Trust me. Okay, go ahead. Next slide, please. So just a little background. Okay, as Pastor David just talked about in 2007, the church applied for a full power non-commercial radio station. But the station went on the air on December 3rd of 2013. So we spent the first 3 years waiting for the CP to be awarded, and that was that application period where it was competitive apps, and I think there were like 2 or 3 other applicants, and we won on points. And I like to credit like Bob Moore for that application, because it was the way he did the application I actually got the thing, and we got on point. So about that time, my wife and I started going to Casa Grande, Calvary, and Pastor David called me in his office one day. He goes, "What do I do with this?" I go, "Well," I think we need to go look for a transmitter site. So he and I and other people, we drove all over Pinal County looking for a transmitter site. And
now, the novice that I was, you're going to have a radio station at your church. We had area behind our building. Why couldn't I put a tower up there? And then we found out, no, the FCA or FCC.
Yeah, so there's something called white space clearance that I learned everything more about. So I give about once a month or so, I'd throw about a half a dozen locations out there, give the geo coordinates to Bob, and he'd come back and go, nope, 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 nope. Which brings us up to the point we were considering in December of 2012 of giving it up. And there was a fair amount of frustration going on over the whole thing. There was some giving in the church specifically for the radio station. The church was fully aware that there were legal fees and things that we had to do just before we could even get the license.
But at the same time, God was opening up some amazing doors. Some of those doors was the fact that even Eric and Jan had started coming to our fellowship, and Eric had helped a few other radio stations, both in Texas as well as in California, get on the air. His technical experience, his engineering experience. There's no way we could have done anything that we did outside of the fact that God brought someone like Eric to us at that exact time. I knew absolutely nothing. I still don't know a whole lot about it. People will ask me things about the radio station, and I'll have to find Eric or Alan or Bruce to answer most of those questions. Again, it was a God thing from the very beginning, and we continued to see his hand in that, even at this point of frustration. And this wasn't the only frustration, but about this time, I joke with my church. I'm sorry for you guys, because the great man of faith that you want to have as a pastor, that's not me, I have faith, but there's times that, man, my faith is so limited, I can't see beyond some of the circumstances that were surrounding. And this was that time that, again, we felt God was calling us to do it. We saw doors opening, but there just seemed to be some big barriers there that just were not working out for us.
Next slide. So, but we knew the Lord had another plan. And it was about this time that the Lord gave Pastor David this scripture.
For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace, not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. He had placed within our hearts, not only my heart, but my wife's heart, many within our congregation, Eric and some of the others that just felt that this was the right timing, that we just needed to press forward and see what God was going to do in a supernatural way. And really and truly supernatural was the rest of the story, as you might say.
Next slide. Okay, so, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. So what we did is, Pastor David and I had a meeting in his office, and he says, "What do we do?" And I said, "Well, let's call a couple of people." And one of those guys was Daniel McClanahan, and he actually was coming into the Phoenix area. So he came down, talked to us a little bit, and his counsel, as wise as it was at the time, was basically, if you want to make money out of this thing, forget it. Walk away now. I said, this will stretch you beyond your wildest dreams. He goes, but if the Lord is in it, it'll happen. So the three of us sat in his office, in Pastor David's office, and we looked at each other and we said, let's call Rob and see what Rob can do for us. So I did, and now Rob and I have known each other for quite a few years. We worked at CSN together briefly, and in and out and back and forth, stuff like that. So if anybody could do it, Rob could. So I coerced him to come to the desert in the winter, which wasn't too difficult to do. So he went down in the morning, and I finished up work that day. By the time I got down there, he had found us a site.
Now, just prior to this, you can go ahead and change the
Excellent.
slide. But during that December to January time, the frustration that I had was that I called another major radio station, one that has the initials that used to say Calvary Satellite Network that don't mean that anymore. I called them because they were broadcasting in our area, but their signal was pretty weak in our area, to ask them, hey, would you guys be interested in a construction permit? We had the construction permit, hadn't done anything with it at this point in time. And I got one of the gals in the office, and I'm drawing an absolute blank for, maybe it is Tracy. Tracy. And then, but what's his name up at Christian Satellite Network?
Mike.
Mike, yes. Mike was not there. I talked to Tracy.
No, that was, not Tracy.
Okay, anyway, I talked to somebody at CSN, Calvary, the Christian Satellite Network. She said, look, Mike's not here. I'll take the message. I'm sure he'd want to talk to you. And in between Mike getting back with me, Rob shows up, finds a place for the tower, and then, through that point in time, about the next day, Mike called me. I wasn't in the office. He left a message on my phone, says, hey, David, this is Mike. Listen, we can definitely do something with it, and we can get you on the air, and we'll take care. Man, just give me a call back. But you know what? The Lord's timing was just so perfect that Rob was there the day before I had given up on the whole thing. And so the Lord actually opened up a great opportunity. Newman Peak, which is about, 20 miles from where the church building is, somewhere in that
It's
area.
a 40-mile microwave hop, so it's 40 miles.
Yeah. So it is. I joked earlier about the fact that we had a tower that was 4,500 foot in elevation. The top of Newman Peak is 4,500 feet. There's a 60-foot tower. We're on that tower, so we're actually 4,560-foot tower that we have the station on. But this is the passage really that the Lord spoke to me on through this whole thing. It was a mountain. It was a mountaintop that was there. And as soon as Rob said, on top of that mountain, within a quarter of a mile, you are within the FCC white space, within a quarter of a mile. There was already power up there. There was already a tower up there. There was already support building up there. Everything that we needed up there except a road, but we'll get into that in a moment. But then this passage from Joshua 14:12 is the one that really and truly spoke to my heart. And actually, I'm going to be sharing that with you in the morning during the devotion time. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about it other than the fact that God gave us that mountain. And again, through miracle after miracle on that. So we can go next slide.
So you have 4 years once you're granted a construction permit to build your station. So it used to be 2 with a couple of extensions, right? Yeah, well, we were in year 4. I remember that. We were in year 4. Or year 3. Yeah, that's typo. I'll fix it for the next time, Bill. Thank you. But in order to go on there, we had to apply for and complete a modification to our CP in 11 months that included a Mexican approval. And actually, we had already done that. We had done that when we got the original construction permit. The sovereign nation, our friendly Indians, would need to agree to the plan because the station in its original location would service the sovereign nation. It would be their primary, the city of license will spring that on you in the next slide. There was a pop count regulation we had to meet. We had to change the city of license, and we had to lease tower space and resolve any site issues. All right, so we only knew this site was up there. So, and the station had to be constructed and approved by December 1st, or we would forfeit the license and all the money we had invested up to that time.
The Mexican approval comes because we're within 250 kilometers from the Mexican border. We don't even broadcast anywhere near that, but yet we needed to get their blessing to put the station on the air.
So with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And what you're looking at there, that's the helicopter guy that was bringing the 2 racks of equipment up. I'm standing at the door of the building on the backside. So, so it's the only thing. The power run's interesting. It goes down this canyon. I know because I had a guy fly me down it in his helicopter the other day. At the beginning of the run is where the transformer is. The end of the run is where the building is. It's probably about a 6 mile up this canyon. So interesting place. You cannot drive up there. You can barely hike up there. Pack mule or helicopter. Next slide, please. So we spent a lot of time between January and September when we finally received the modification in 3 areas: legal, technical, financial. We had to apply for the modification, change the city license, reapply for a Mexican waiver, and reconcile the pop count, not to mention deal with sovereign nation. Okay, so if anybody has ever dealt with Mexico, they don't actually give you anything. We actually still don't have an approval from them in writing, and we'll get into that a little bit later. The sovereign nation is another interesting group of people to deal with because they don't want to do anything and give you anything either. It was a miracle the way we basically got a memo from them saying, we don't want you to cover our sovereign nation. Go somewhere else. So that was and technically we had to lease the transmitter site and perform any necessary site mods required because of the equipment, and then design, order, and build a studio transmitter site. And we had to figure out how we were going to pay for it. Most of the upfront costs have been for legal and filing, a few things like that. And we decided together that we wouldn't commit to building the station until we had the CP in hand. So from January until about early September, we were all queued up and ready to go. And basically that, next slide, please.
And we had actually, I believe, purchased or ordered some stuff from John Sims, but just kind of said, hold on to it, wait. We're not quite ready for it, just in anticipation of all of this.
We had quotes and everything. I mean, everything was complete. All we needed was the CP mod, and we got it just in time.
I don't know if it's later, but let me just touch on it real quick. All the modifications that had to be done, there were 5 different ones, and Harry Martin was our lawyer at that point in time. He told us that any one of those things were a possibility, a good, strong possibility of getting done. But he did not remember ever going to the FCC with 5 different modifications, all on the same CP that had to be done. And Harry told me one day, he says, it would truly be a miracle of God if you guys got this modification. And so when we found out, I reminded Harry that, yes, God does work miracles.
So the thing that impressed me most along the way was that the Lord was doing it.
Yeah.
No question about it. And because no matter what we did, he had already been there.
One of the other things, too, it was getting about close to this time that the Lord brought another miracle our way. Bruce Lorenzen, who's now our program director, he and his wife, who had been winter visitors, decided they were going to move full-time into the Casa Grande area. Why somebody from Montana or someplace like that, someplace north, would move down to the desert in Casa Grande is beyond me, other than the fact that God picked them up and moved them down. And Bruce had already told me, he says, oh yeah, I've got a lot of experience in radio. Well, he didn't have a lot of experience. He used to edit his pastor's teaching and put them on the radio. He didn't say he had a lot. He just said he's done a little bit, and I figured that's more than I've done. So you've got a lot of experience, and so he got involved right away. Shortly around that time, too, Alan Ickban came on staff at the church as our worship leader. Yeah, it's September, so right at that time. And so, again, God brought him, and Alan is working as a manager of our station. He's also does a lot of other, all of our FCC filings, a lot of other things, and working with Bruce, again, just keeping the thing running. And yeah, he's our master cable maker. Yeah, so.
Right. Yeah. Alan goes, I know how to solder. I go, oh, good.
Yeah, we have.
All right. So, this is very challenging. Okay, getting all this done. We wrestled with the tower. We were told that the tower was structurally wouldn't support our equipment load, even though I knew better than that. That was about the time that there were some structural changes to the structural specifications for towers. Putting our equipment on their tower would have tipped that off. So I had done some cellular work for a couple of years in the LA area. So I was kind of familiar with what was going on, which this was good because this was very consuming, dealing with structural engineers that you can't talk to directly and things like that. So so it was any one of those things could have been a showstopper for us technically along the way. And this was just prior to the CP coming up. So we were aware of all that stuff. Next slide, please. But so was God.
Yeah.
So some things were, the granting of the CP mod was kind of a miracle in and of itself. And like Pastor David just mentioned, the legal and our engineering people had many doubts because this is a pretty unusual, pretty extensive CP modification. I think we got it, the grant came on like a Friday night at 5:15. The only guy at the FCC who could approve it, and it was it just one of those. It had to be God because it wasn't us, and it wasn't anything we were doing. We knew that He was working on it. So a couple of highlights. We proved our interference contour using a different map resolution, which was unapproved SEC map resolution. Ours is actually finer. The guy said, he goes, normally I wouldn't do this, but I'll accept your map. FCC needed to accept our revised pop count numbers from two different censuses in the original city of licenses. So now I'm going to let Pastor David pronounce the name of the original city of license. It's Choo-Choo or Choo-Choo.
Yeah. One of the original things is that, again, when Bob Moore was getting the license application, he just looked around. He found a place that would work, and he filed for that. It was in the middle of the Indian reservation, a little community called Choo-Choo or Chewy-Choo, and it's right there in the middle of the reservation. We found out through the midst of this, we're going to have to move from there to do this whole CP modification, but what really was the icing on the cake is when the nation, the tribal councils actually wrote a letter and says, we don't want your radio station on our Indian land. And so we had that in hand to go to the FCC, and the FCC says, well, if they don't want you on their land, we'll definitely grant you a move to a different location. And so,
Indians carry a lot of weight, so...
One of the other quick things is Mexico. We had to do this twice, the first time as well as on the modification. The first time it went down there, it was literally down there for about 3 years with no action in Mexico. Harry Martin contacted me one day and says, look, this has been hanging down there. I've got another, my co-equal down in Mexico that for $5,000 he could go ahead and walk that through the process, get you approved in Mexico. To me, that sounded like a buy-off, and and the Lord just checked me on that and said, number one, this is the Lord's money. Number two, I hate buy-offs and underhanded things. I don't think that Harry was doing it. That I'm just thinking, again, the Mexico government, the way that it was at that point in time. And so I said, you know what? If the Lord wants us to have that station, we'll have that station. We don't need to pay that to get that, pushed through over there. And actually that extra time down there allowed us to build up some finances that we're going to need to continue on with the station.
Right. We still don't have the Mexican waiver. We'll probably never get it, and that's fine with us.
Yeah.
So.
Next one.
Okay, so now it became a foot race. So let us run the race with endurance. Let's run the endurance of the race that is set before us, looking into Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Okay, so we got the CP grant in September. We had equipment lead time, like especially antenna and things like that, microwave stuff like that we had to really scramble. And so I had equipment quotes in my hand, and none of our vendors would take purchase orders because we were a church. So I walked in and I said, there's a couple of things we got to order right away. It's a $16,000 antenna, and it's this $14,000 microwave system. And I said, you need to write these guys a check and give them the check number over the phone and send them in the mail. So we essentially had 3 months to build this station. to get it on the air. And that's when you had guys like Bruce and Alan, but the Lord had provided for us an electrician, community electrician, and he provided for us a surveyor. Neither of those gentlemen charged us a dime for any of the work they did for us, and they did a lot of work.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I figured that we saved the church probably $40,000 to $45,000 by getting these guys to come in, and both of them were like, "We need to do this."
By the way, they get free mention on our radio station on a regular basis. I figured, you know what, you guys did that. We can talk about how, we really appreciate DL Electric and their support of Christian radio in the Casa Grande area. We really appreciate yep.
So one of the things I was wrestling with most of July and August of that year was the tower company. They said, you're going to have to pay to fix the tower. Somewhere between $90,000 and $120,000 is what we think to do the structural upgrade on the tower. One of the board members of the church said, $120,000 for welding? I want more welded for that. So it was. I go, we could, but anyway. They finally agreed to let us put our equipment on the tower if we would agree to pay for the structural work once we were on the air. So we made that agreement.
Not having the money to
Not
do it,
having
by
the
the
money
way.
to do that, right? So I'll never forget that board meeting. So in an effort to mitigate some of the potential tower cost, we trimmed our station budget to the bare essentials. Because the transmitter site is remote and you cannot drive there, I had built a lot of redundancy. I had actually I had designed in redundancy 2 microwave channels, 2 transmitters, 2 of everything. So we basically pulled all that out just to save money, and that worked out. And we kept running into obstacles. We got we're on a microwave dish. He sent us we're operating the 6 gig band. The guy sent us 12 gig microwave dishes. Same size. Feed horn was wrong. I didn't discover that until we put it up on the roof. And I had trouble finding a helicopter and a tower crew to do the work because that's kind of a little society, it's kind of a niche group, yeah. And you have to know somebody who knows somebody. So we ordered the antenna, but we also ordered the cable with the connector on the end, and it was the wrong connector. We didn't find that out until the guys were ready to put the antenna on the tower. And we had to agree to resolve the mixed interference issues, and we didn't know what the lease cost on the tower site was going to be prior to going on air. There were 2 cell sites up there at the time, 2 cell operators or wireless operators up there at the time. Because I had been in the wireless business, I assumed we were looking at about $1,500 a month minimum for the site once we got on air. Okay, but God was faithful.
You're there.
So,
well, again, one of the big things and expensive things was a transmitter, and so somebody just happened to have one in his garage that he loaned us. I think he stepped out. He was
that's right.
in charge of one of the
and if Rob wants it, he's going to have to walk up there and
it's
get
up
it.
on top of the mountain, Rob. Yeah.
So I'd done things like purchase a couple extra coax connectors and stuff that's inexpensive and stuff like that. So it just so happened that we had one up on the mountain the day we were installing the antenna, and we just replaced the connector. That was the wrong one. One of the tower company had a project manager who was. This is pretty amazing because most of the time tower companies will deal with you with, do your own thing, I'll do mine, and tough rocks if it doesn't work out for you, right? This guy almost took a vested interest in the radio station. He came over to the studio, looked at what we were doing. He's pretty excited about what we were doing. I could call him. He gave me his personal cell number and said, just call me if you have any questions. So I called him up and I said, I can't find a tower crew and a helicopter. He goes, I'll charge you. He goes, but how'd you like me to do that for you? And he did it for the price. He did it for what I had estimated the cost was going to be to do that. And then our microwave company vendor, he expedited a shipment. I actually had 2 6-gig dishes, full replacement, in about 4 days.
Just in time to put the one up on the mountain.
Yeah, I was putting it up on Saturday before the Monday install. And so the $120,000 cost, which kept going up and down, that turned into $20,000.
Yeah, yeah. The amazing thing about that is I took that to the church and said, this is just a major hurdle that we have right now, and the only way that we're going to be able to use that tower up there, and that's the only one that's available to us in this area. We don't have time or the finances to build a tower. This is where we have to go. It's $90,000 to $120,000 to repair the tower. We just need you guys to be praying and see what the Lord would do. And we kept pressing on and going forward.
At this point, we knew that that's what the Lord wanted us to do, because he had been faithful all the way up to this point. And we're in the middle of this thing, and to the man, the board said, let's go.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Huh?
Don't forget, we also changed owners of the tower at that time, too.
So, no, actually, Crown owned the tower the whole time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we talked a lot about helicopter. We weren't kidding. This is Pastor Dave and I went up in this little dude.
There's no doors on.
No doors on this thing. This is our first helicopter ride. The guy said, "You might want to keep your arms and hands inside."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Try not to take any
Inside
pictures
the
out
ride.
there."
By the way, that place that he lands on, when you're in the air, it's a postage stamp, okay? And he's landing on that postage stamp. Because this mountain peak is very small. It's very small, and it's got a lot of equipment there.
This is a second helicopter trip up there. I took the electrician, and I think I took the construction manager up there for the tower company. This had doors on it. That guy's claim to fame. When you're looking for helicopters, you find every helicopter company you can. You're going through the phone book. So the second guy, his claim to fame was he would herd cattle with his helicopter. Comforting thought. This is us. This is the Friday before the Monday install. We're trying to tell the guy who owned the helicopter how to get the equipment up there. He goes, "Get out of my way, boys." He lashed it up, and he dropped that thing within 10 feet of the front door of the building, literally. Just parked it right out in front of the building. I was thinking we were going to have to carry it about a quarter mile from the landing site. And then there we are. We had a number of volunteers from the church. Tom is one of them. Took all this heavy stuff up there and had it up there. We're all ready to go. So when we went up there Monday morning, next slide. All we had to take up there was our microwave dish equipment. Next slide. And our antenna and the tower crew, and we went to work. Next slide.
And then one more.
And then one more. And this is Wednesday, the third day of the install, which was a Wednesday. That's our surveyor. The reason he's behind the helicopter is there's also Civil Air Patrol and some Air National Guard equipment up there. All that stuff is solar powered. It's kind of interesting facility. But there's so much radio interference up there that he's using the helicopter as a shield. So, next slide. Some more pictures for you there. A couple of you seen. That's our antenna on the tower inside the building. So Rob and I were up there on Monday. I had actually built those two racks in the studio. They were sitting in the hall. And I had it all fired up, made it work. The only thing I didn't do was light the transmitter up.
Yeah, understand what he said. No, he loaded up both those racks in the hallway at the church outside of the studio, had everything working just like it was up on the mountain. So to make sure that everything was working before we brought them up on the mountain. So.
Well, we also had to, since we can't drive to Radio Shack from up there, and it's a $1,500 trip if you forget something for the helicopter, I basically made a kit. All right, so everything was in a box, every screw, every washer. So there's some more install pics, and that's me on the roof with the right dish. And that's Alan and Bruce looking at the computer like, what do we do with it now? Okay, so after all the hard work, we went on the air in test mode on November 12th. That was a Tuesday, 2.5 months after the CP mod had been issued. That was a road race. So we put the station on the air. Rob was on the mountain. I was actually down in the studio. I get a call from him. He goes, "Get me off this mountain." He goes, "It's windy up here." And the helicopter guy had gotten off the mountain. He was down at the landing site at the base of the mountain, and they couldn't find him. So we went up and got him. Had transmitter on the air in test mode because we wanted to hear it. Pastor David hops in his truck and takes off.
I'm driving all over the county listening to see how far I could hear it. I got to one community, and all of a sudden it went dead. And I thought, whoa, what happened? Well, they had shut it off. But, boy, it frustrated me because I wanted to go further. So
Yeah, so my phone rings. He goes, "Can you turn it back on?" I go, "No, not tonight."
Yeah.
So we proofed it the next day, and then we left it on. And then Rob and I drove all over creation trying to figure out where it was. Interestingly enough, and we don't have a slide of it, but our predictive coverage map is almost exactly what the station does.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So so we felt pretty accomplished. So we turned off the air and we waited for our license to be submitted and that be granted. And that happened on December 3rd.
And it was actually a Tuesday night. We have a women's Bible study Tuesday night. My wife teaches that Bible study, and she wants to have somebody, a man on the church campus when the women are there at the Bible study because we're located in an industrial area, and she just wants that added safety. I don't know what safety I would be. I could make a call. But anyway, I was there, and I was in my office and checking my email, and all of a sudden, like from the FCC, I thought, whoa, what is this? And no, it's from Harry Martin. And Harry said, hey, you have been granted your license. I just saw it. It's posted on their deal. And so I called Eric, and he's over in Maricopa, about 25 miles away. I said, hey, we just got it. And he says, hey, do you want to turn it on tonight? And I said, absolutely, let's do that. So on his way over, I ran over. My wife's in the middle of her Bible study. I go barging through the door. I says, guess what? We got our FCC final, okay. And, of course, the ladies were all excited. And told her that Eric was coming over. We were going to flip the switch, go live on the air. So my wife brought all of the gals in her women's Bible study, came over to the main building. They all crowded into the hallway there by the studio, much like the hallway you've got here. And we prayed just before it. And then Eric turned the switch on, and I got to do the initial call letters and the welcome of the station. And that was just, you guys know that initial time of turning it on, just how exciting that is. And I still get goosebumps thinking about it. So.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. And actually, you threw the switch, so.
Oh yes.
That's right. I let him turn the transmitter on. It's the only time he's been technical.
Yes, that's right. I don't touch it after that. No.
So what's God been doing? So we've been on the air for a little over 2.5 years, almost coming up on 3 years here. Unbeknownst to us, we were on in the prisons. So the prisons play us all day, all night. Actually, I think until about midnight or something like that. And they start us up about 4 in the morning. We didn't know that was going on until we started receiving a couple letters from the prisoners. And because of that kind of led us to some other thing. So apparently Arizona incarcerates Hawaiian prisoners. So I'll let you.
Yeah, there's a few hundred Hawaiian prisoners in Arizona in some of the private prison facilities. Underneath the range of easily within our 60 dB, very solid sound of our radio station. There's 15 prisons, federal prisons, state prisons, immigration prisons, private prisons, that whole area. Over 35,000 individuals incarcerated in that area. The radio station penetrates prison walls, by the way, and these guys started listening to the station. In that prison facility, one of the private institutions, they have a few hundred Hawaiian inmates because it's cheaper for them to pay Arizona to house them than to build another prison in Hawaii. Some of them had been in Hawaii, had been listening to a Christian radio station over there, Free Inside, Reverend Bula Eastman. And so they wrote him from Arizona, says, hey, we've got a great Christian radio station here. It'd be awesome if you could get your program on that station. And so next thing we get is an email from Reverend Bula, and he's a big Hawaiian guy, and he loves the Lord, man, and he's just on fire, and he's just an awesome person. And so he wanted to be on the radio station. He's willing to pay for the radio station. He's now on the radio station every evening ministering not only to the Hawaiian inmates, but to other inmates. And since then, we've got another Hawaiian pastor ministering on Sunday evenings. The Lord's opened up the opportunity. The sovereign nation didn't want us to be on the nation. Well, now we cover the nation better than we ever could have, because our tower is like on that top of that mountain overlooking the major portion of the nation. And one of the programs that we run on Sunday nights, and I really encourage you guys, if any of you are ministering in an area where there's Native Americans, this program, without reservation, The Storyteller, is absolutely awesome. It reminds me of Gardens, Pacific Garden Mission. Yeah, what's their program? Unshackled. Yes, it is the story. It's the unshackled stories of Native Americans, and it is so powerful and really, really good. And it's a free program you can get, and it will really, I believe, minister to the Native Americans in your area.
Right. So one of the things that we put up some staff here while we do that. So we put the station on the air, and we had Pastor David record some IDs and things like that, some welcomes and stuff. So Rob and I are driving down Interstate 8, trying to see how far we go, and he goes, "Who's that guy doing that ID?" I go, "That's Pastor David." He goes, "Man, he has a great radio voice."
I learned from Scott.
That's right. One of the things you kind of think about especially when you first go on the air, is like, is anybody really listening to me?
Yeah.
Right? So we had almost an instant response from the prisoners. There have been, and over the past 2.5, 3 years, we've had people come up to us at outreaches and events and stuff like that and go, "Hey, I listened to you guys," or "I really like your radio station," or "I listen to so and so a lot." But Pastor Dave has actually been able to share the Lord or bring people to the Lord, have walked through the front door of the church.
Yeah. They listened to the radio station and came and just wanted to see whose station it was. Well, a guy came in, and he and his wife knew the Lord. This guy thought he knew the Lord, but the more we talked, the more he realized, no, he'd just been trying to be a good guy, and he had never really surrendered his life to the Lord. So right there in the foyer of the church, got to lead him to Christ. And just an awesome, awesome thing. People ask, well, has your radio station really grown your church huge? We have seen some growth. It's not been huge and dynamic, but we have seen growth because people come in and says, "Man, I heard you guys on the radio," and I said, "And you decided to come anyway." And so we've got people coming. But more than that, within the community, I've got a pastor friend of Trinity Baptist Church, Phil Calvert, and he says, "Man, you guys are my number one button on our radio station. We listen to you all the time. Really appreciate the fact." Phil actually is on Sunday afternoons. We've tried to get some of the local pastors on, because, again, what we wanted this station, our vision for this station, was to be very much a community Christian radio station. We wanted to reach the community for Christ, and also to encourage other believers, regardless of what church they went to encourage them and strengthen them in the Lord and in the truths of God's Word. They can get hype anywhere, they can get music anywhere, but we wanted to have good, solid teaching, and we have others beyond Calvary teachers that are on there, but we wanted to make sure that they are good and solid. The Lord has brought into our mix volunteers that have been absolutely amazing. One of those volunteers is Roger Permort, and our community and sponsor rep. And Roger has gone out, and he has started a Saturday program of interviewing city and community leaders in the area. And his first interview was with our city mayor and our city manager. And that's just been really exciting to see that. We're looking to see one of our local businesses that might sponsor that program, and I think it would be a real positive. I don't know, is there another slide, or is that it?
That's it for that. A couple more. So we decided early on, or one of the things that I had mentioned to Pastor David about owning and operating a radio station, I says, this is really a missions outreach. I go, your mission, you don't know where your mission's going to be. I said, but that's really the only way we need to go about operating it, because that makes it the Lord's deal, and that means He's responsible for it. All we have to do is just be available. And so that's what we did. So we finally negotiated the tower lease after we went on the air. End up being about $750 a month. It's got a 5-year lease with an escalator on it, and we still got about 2 years left on that one. Tower structurals and costs were resolved after we went on the air. So Nextel had a site up there. They had an old Uniden site, and they abandoned it. So we basically told Crown Castle we would take the antennas off the tower so we could, mitigate the $120,000 structural cost. And they said, no, you can't do that until they let us know that they've abandoned the site. So it was like February or March or something like that. Yeah. We get a call from Crown Castle and said, hey, I'm the new program manager for Crown Castle for your area. I need to talk to you about a bill and a tower. And she says, well, they've abandoned the site. They've notified us, so it's going to cost you $20,000 to pull the antennas off the tower, take the coax off the tower, and basically make it structurally safe.
So in other words, they didn't have to do hardly anything to the tower. We paid to get a crew up there to remove that old equipment. And I know we're out of time right now, but I want to give you a really cool story about the helicopter thing. We contacted this particular helicopter company, and the guy says, my wife listens to your station. We'll give you a helicopter ride. This is the owner of a helicopter company. He's got like 80 helicopters.
Yeah, he's at trains.
They fly all over the place, charters and everything. He says, we'll do it as long as you do it, when I have time. And so his time is sometimes early Sunday morning, and and we get free helicopter, and that's like outrageous, absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, we're going up again next Monday. I call him up, or I sent him an email. I said, I'd like to go up there at your convenience, of course. He goes, how about Monday morning? And I always say, if we need to pay for this, we'll do that. He goes, oh, no. He goes, it's my volunteer. So, all right. So, yeah, God's doing some things with us. Got some, future and a hope, right? And that's what we're doing. Anyway, that's our story.
Yeah, that's our story. We're sticking to it. Real quick, let me say this. Some of you guys have been in the radio a lot longer than we have, and you know miracles beyond what we've even seen just through the years as different things go. Some of you guys are relatively new, and it just amazes me. God wants his word out in the air. He wants to touch people's lives in your communities. And man, my encouragement to you is just to continue to pray, continue to see God work those miracles, and let him be your encouragement in it all. Amen.
Hey, so we're back at 7 o'clock tonight for Lloyd, and he's with us, so that's great. The bad weather and the bombs didn't keep him away. So be praying for the tri-state area and for the law enforcement.